Well, again, another very important, deep question. So I'll say two or three things about it. The first, the words, first of all, you said very conscious. Gugu has used intentional quite a bit. I've met very few people with such a deep sense of purpose. And the reason that's important is, for example, the whole concept of lift as you rise, right? So that fits in very beautifully with what you just described. He really felt strongly that there was very little point in little islands of excellence, that he could achieve so much, in a sea of people that didn't have opportunity, that weren't able to fulfill their own potentials. And if there was anything he could do to make that happen, he would. He did it at individual level, opening up all this opportunity and using that leverage. He did it at institutional level. So most of our research networks and relationships, for example, were not with Stellenbosch and Wits. Very purposely, we went to WUSU, we went to Sfako Mahato, and we leveraged the access we had at UCT to empower and lift. I mean, it was very, 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 very purposeful. The other example about how this fit into purpose that has just come to me is, for example, I remember, I can't remember when it was, but the whole Hamilton Nike Scholarship, okay, that came on the back of the board of a corporate coming through and saying, we would like people like you to be on our board, and this is how we might remunerate you. And him saying, give me that money that you would be giving to us as board members, and let's create a scholarship, for example, to educate and uplift and give people who don't have access and opportunity. So it was that kind of thing. He was always really looking to leverage who he was and that access that he has to uplift and empower others. It was incredible. Very, very intentional and consistent about it.
And we hear Prof. Biko on a number of occasions in the book to further reiterate your point, this idea that lifting as one rises wasn't a mantra for him. It was a way of life. It was just the way of life. And so you see it coming through. Prof. Slim, we won't talk COVID, right? But I do want to talk leadership, and I want to talk the country's challenges. Because I think we're all familiar with the country's challenges. I think we're all living through them in one way or another right now. But we also have this gift of what visionary leadership and impactful leadership could really look like. How do we package that as we intentionally build a pipeline of leaders, not only for the medical fraternity, but across all sectors? How do we take the gift and the blueprint of Prof. Mayosi and package it into something that we can replicate as a way of leading our country and our continent?
Yeah, thanks, Lizzie. I would summarize, I could go on a long story, but summarize it in 3 points that stand out for me in Professor Mayosi. The first is excellence. He had no compromise. It had to be the best. He was not willing to have the second best. And he never, in all of his attempts to excel, to rise, he never forgot his base. He never forgot his roots. For example, one of his biggest scientific contributions is actually called IMPI. And he named it IMPI as something that had its roots in Africa. So it was really his excellence. The second, for me, was that he was passionate. Oh, I wasn't holding it. That he was passionate. That he believed in what he did. He was not going to be distracted from it. I had a dinner with him to try and convince him to change jobs. I said to him, the time has come for you to replace me and succeed me as the president of the Medical Research Council. And his answer to me was, not yet. He understood that his passion lied with his students, and he said to me, I am not done yet. I have to finish this task. And he was passionate about it, the registrars, the mentors, and so on. And lastly, for me, it's his institutional building. He was not simply about his own rise. He was not rising on the backs of others and just worrying about himself. His whole approach was that as he rose, he took institutions with him, and that's his legacy. He will leave behind the institutions that are stronger because of him. They will remain the building blocks and the foundations long after he is gone, and that's the strength that he left us.
Sure. I'm hearing excellence, I'm hearing passion, but I'm also hearing intentionality around institution building, and building institutions that last, that actually change systemically what societies look like and what societies become. I want to come, Dr. Kopano, to what I would describe as his scientific courage that we see in the book. We learn about an otherwise strange, inverted commas, decision to at one point decide, actually, I'm going to deviate and going to do something. I'm going to go pursue research instead of going the pathway that everybody understands towards the completion of the medical degree in the way that it's ordinarily done. And one reflects on that and reflects on how brave and courageous he was in pursuit of the things that he felt needed to be done. And as I bring this question to you, I'm building on the question of leadership from Prof. Slim, because as a leader yourself in public health, how does this experience leave you a shade braver and a shade a bit more courageous? What are you going to be doing differently and diverting from, because suddenly you know that actually it can be done and that there isn't only the option of the trodden pathway, you can create a pathway yourself?
Sure, that's such a beautiful question. I mean, I think back to, again, I think when we started doing clinical rounds at Pretiski, and a friend of mine remarked that, have you noticed the black students, you know, Hospital Street, many people here will know Hospital Street, walk along the edges. Now, I was at medical school a decade ago, so things might have changed. But you would seldom see, and there were very few black sort of consultants or senior people at the time, but there would come Mayosi, as short as he is, marching down the middle. And they would be almost like, you know, you almost want to, because you don't feel like you fit, you're unsure of, you know, what are you doing here, are you going to pass? And just watching him walk right down the middle of that corridor with his confidence, and he walks fast, and you can hear him with his little heeled shoes. And we would almost just like follow suit, like we felt like there was a pathway opened up for us, both just physically and spiritually. He created space. I'm even getting emotional for us, feeling like it's possible. I mean, and that was just watching him, even before you had the courage to have an interaction. But I think what really just struck me so deeply is often you've got many talented people in the world and they do great things, but it's often their legacy in their own lifetime. But he was thinking generations. Yes. I mean, I see Gokela and Pula in the audience, in Pico, so many others where you listen to their stories and you think, oh my God. Like this man was planning for generations upon generations, and that he knew that the work he was doing couldn't be done in one lifetime. And so it wasn't about him. It was about finding ways to plant seeds for trees that would feed, and that we are eating the fruits, right? Yeah. There's a proverb of trees that were planted by others 100 years ago, and he understood that. And I think that blows my mind and reminds me both to be humble, but also to, kind of think long term, that if you're going to make real structural change, you're not going to go at it alone.
Sure.
And you need to be thinking about who you're passing the baton to.
So I'm about to open up to the audience, but I just want to come back to this excellent point you've raised about the generational vision, and I want to bring it to you, Prof, because you were, what's the right English word? I'll say encouraged to go for the red gown. Because the black gown, yeah, it looked good on you, but red was a better suited color for you. And again, it's an example of how Prof. Mayosi was able to see people in that generational vision in roles that they themselves couldn't as yet see themselves. So first tell us the story of the red gown, because we want to hear it. But also maybe if you could add something to what we've just heard Kopano sharing with us, this uncanny ability to see talent and affirm it at a place where, and a time where that talent doesn't see itself as yet.
Thanks. So again, for many of you that knew Bongani here, he was actually a very, very humorous person. He had a wonderful sense of humor, even if it was a bit quirky, and he had this funny little laugh of his, but he had a wonderful sense of humor. So anyway, it was graduation, I just received my master's, and as my supervisor, he had come to graduation, and we were all excited, and we were outside, I think, taking pictures. And he comes to me and goes, Biko! Biko! He's coming, Biko! And he says, aye, man. He says, this black, it looks okay, but imagine what you would look like in an orange gown. You know? And it was his sort of humorous way of planting the seed. It wasn't the occasion then to come back, but he had planted the seed, and trust me, in his own little way, he kept saying, hey, how about that orange gown, you know, and this is what we can make it about. So yes, and again, I think Kopano has really captured something that I think made him very, very, very different from most leaders, which is really to...
Okay.
That's not me. Kopano has really touched on something that made him sort of extra special and stand out. And that was this uncanny ability to really look 10, 15, 20 years way down the, down, even beyond that. And what it would take to get there, and how every little building block mattered. And what that was able to do for him was that it transcended medicine. You know, it really transcended medicine. There are many, many other people in all matter of fields, right? Who benefited from his generosity, from his giving, from his advice, but all of it fitting into that bigger plan. You know, it's making South Africa better, it's making our communities better, it's building those institutions, it's building for Africa. He was a really deep, Africa-loving, God-fearing person, and this was his mission, and this was what he was going to do to get us there.
So just before I open up, Prof. Biko, I understand a comment in the book that you still ask yourself today when you feel stumped, what would Bongani do?
Very much so.
And I'd imagine there's a fair number in the audience. So I'm going to do a quick test. I'm going to start off with the favorites test. Let's just see. Hands up if you believe that you are Prof. Mayosi's favorite. Like an honest moment of truth. And we see the hands up. And then a second quick test. How many of us in the room today, in our respective spaces, ask ourselves, what would Bongani do when stunned? Let's see those hands up. I can see a good 10, 15 hands up. Beautiful. So what I want to do is I want to open up the conversation. I want to firstly to say to my panelists, I think you've given us some beautiful insights and some beautiful stories. I want to open up, and as I open up, we're going to have some roving microphones. I'm going to invite you to please just introduce yourself by name. And of course, if you have a special relationship with Prof. Mayosi, please let us know. Are you a mentor, a mentee, a friend, a colleague? And then proceed to ask your question. You're also welcome to make a comment. In addition to that, I would appreciate it very much if you'd indicate to whom you'd like to pose your question. I will also let you know that I will not allow you to ask one question to all the panelists. because we just won't have time, and we want to get as many voices in as possible. And so with that, let's get an indication. Who would like to ask a question, please? Sir, I see your hand. Do I have help with microphones? Thank you so much, Ndumiso. Let's maybe take 2 or 3. Let me see other hands. Okay, sir, I see you as well. And sir, I see you in the corner. Thank you so much. Please go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, and to the Mayosi family, to the Kumalo family, and to all the eminent professors who are here. My name is Bongani Mayosi. I'm the Deputy Minister of Health. I'm delighted to Judy, my classmate, who are a class of 85, because I got this invitation from her. She always sends snippets in our class as to what is happening. And also, I'm delighted that I'm appearing on page 91 of this book. Yes. I was part of the orientation committee that actually was welcoming Dr. Mayosi in his first year at medical school. I would just like to say part of what is going to make us go a long way with these memories is how far are we, maybe Professor Abdul Karim Slim or any of the leaders would answer, how far are we with the legacy that he actually created of producing as many PhDs as possible in this country? We travel the world, and the influence of the World Health Organization, professors and eminent professors and PhD scholars who are not there, there are very few who are coming in from Africa, and in particular South Africa. So we need to inject, not only for our country, but also for the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. How far are we? Have we picked up the baton? And we'll come back to the question, Prof. Slim. Allow me to give you an opportunity, please, sir. Please go ahead.
Yes, I feel immensely privileged to be here with my wife today. I'm a senior GP in the sector. I did have a link with UCT in family medicine for a while. I met Prof. Bongani at the 75th birthday of Dr. Professor Dang Mayana, who would love to have been here today, a dear friend. Bongani I recognize, as Professor Salim said, with his beautiful smile. I was persona non grata at the birthday party because I wasn't a dignitary and there was nobody to take photographs. And that was quite funny, so I was the unofficial photographer and went from day to day. But while I listen to everyone today, I have a picture before me, and that is that South Africa is having, or has had, a heart transplant of the level of our Chris Barnard. And as Salim spoke about institutionalization and America and being recognized by the world, if not now, then in time to come, he will be known. And he'll be recognized as maybe the spiritual transformation of Africa, starting with the heart. And we really feel, I feel on behalf of my middle-class white community, that South Africa's changed for better. There's no going back. And so in Bongani's life and death, and interestingly that he was known for his work with cardiomyopathy, and a heart must fail ultimately. And he's had to die for reasons beyond our understanding. But now we celebrate the heart transplant that he's been part of.
Thank you very much. Can I get your name, sir, so we don't call you the unofficial photographer? I didn't get the name.
I have a also name.
Yes.
Or Jigila Maweni Diahamba.
Jigela Maweni.
It's a bad name. Yeah. I'm a BITS graduate.
Yes.
And I did family medicine at College of Medicine, and I did public health and tropical medicine, aviation medicine, and I'm an ordinary GP.
Thank you. Thank you very
Charles
much.
Shuley.
Thank you so very much, Charles. Thank you very much, Charles. I do want to apologize for one omission, ladies and gentlemen, and that is just to alert you that we do have cameras in the room, and so I hope that there's no one who is against if they come up on the cameras. They are on either side, so as you see us asking questions, you might be recorded, and I hope that that's okay with everyone. I'm going to take one more. I think there was a hand. Yes, please, sir.
My name is Tando, and I'm a friend.
Please go ahead.
Yes, my question revolves around worldview. All of us do things out of our worldview. And I'd like to ask Gugu and Pico, as people who were almost every day with him, how much of God did influence the worldview of Dr. Bongani?
Thank you so much, Tando. Sure, it's a beautiful question. I want to do a quick scan just to make sure there isn't someone who's absolutely burning with the question right now that I'm missing. And I am hoping that we can do one final round of 3 before I hand back to Dr. Judy. So there isn't a hand, but let me come to Prof. Slim first. It's the question of legacy. And we're reminded by the Honorable Deputy Minister that there was a very intentional legacy building project of producing as many PhDs as possible. And I think the number in the book was 1,000 at some point. And the question is, of course, have we picked up the baton? Are we building on that legacy? And what are your thoughts on that, Prof. Slim?
Bongani's vision was to have a medical community that was not just good at looking after patients, but was also world-class in pushing the boundaries of medical knowledge. And so that was his dream. He was one of the principal architects that pushed the notion of clinician scientist and the dual medical PhD track. And he was one of the main producers of the students who graduated in both. South Africa has actually done quite well in that regard. But I have to say that over the last few years, we've been falling behind. We have a lot more to do to achieve that goal that he set. Because I think it's not just that he wanted great clinician scientists. He wanted leaders. If you take, in tennis, they say, the greats have the Grand Slam. 3 tournaments that they must win. In Bongani's case, he hit the Grand Slam. He achieved the highest accolade you can get in the academies, and by becoming a member of the US National Academy of Medicine. He was on the editorial board of one of the 2 top medical journals called The Lancet. He was on the editorial, you know what that means? He is determining policy in medical journals that impact the whole world. And the third was that he was given the highest recognition he could receive in South Africa for his research, and that's the Platinum Award of the Medical Research Council. I know of no one else in this country that has achieved the Grand Slam. There's only one I know of, and that gives you some indication. So, have we reached that target again? No. Are we going to reach that target again? If Mayosi did his job, yes.
Sure. Yes, we can give a round of applause to that. Maybe a quick comment, Dr. Kopano, for you, or your take on that question, because I think, you spoke about the generational project, and I'm keen to hear from a young public health player in the space. What is your sense around, do you feel that there's a responsibility that has been transferred, a baton that has been picked up by your generation, from Prof. Mayosi?
I mean, I certainly think, having had the great privilege of having conversations with Mrs. Pumla and Mpiko and Ndobeko, who I can't see, and many others, Nelly, that I do feel encouraged and inspired that yes, the baton has been passed on, and that these individuals in their own right, we could write books about them as well, their stories. I do think we have a responsibility to keep doing what we're doing, right? Do what we can with what we have where we are. So lift as we rise, whether it be a student or a family member, or be the difference you want to see in the workplace. So I still think, hopefully through this book and the stories that will continue to be shared, that we will embody his vision and take it forward. But yes, I think there are many incredible people working across fields in South Africa, not just in the health sciences, that have been touched by Bongani's legacy and are in their own right taking it forward.
Thank you. Prof. Mpiko, before I bring the worldview question, a comment on the legacy question?
Yes, I'm going to take the risk of differing slightly from Prof. Slim here. on the PhD question. And of course, it's wonderful for any society to have Grand Slam winners. Okay, but I think the big, for me, what I got from him, understanding about why the 1,000 PhDs, is that he had a firm belief that we would not answer the important questions of the day until we were able to thoroughly define them and understand them, and that degrees like a PhD give you that capacity to do that critical thinking that allows you to answer the questions, okay? And that was the motivation. So you might not be a grand slammer, okay, but hopefully through that process you would gain a great amount that would facilitate our ability to answer questions that only we here in Africa are going to be able to solve, all right? And that collectively we could then move forward, all right? And yes, he was about excellence, but he also recognized that all of us have the potential for excellence in us, in our own different capacities, and that this 1,000 PhD call would build a momentum of saying, let's find the excellence within us. Let's be able to move things forward, again, for community, country, and continent. Yeah, that's, I just wanted to add to that. Yeah.
So, thank you very much, Prof. So I want to hold on that, and then Guga, I'm going to come to you, because the question that came from Tando is, how much of Prof. Mayosi's worldview was shaped by his belief in God? And you can go first, Prof. Biko, and then now.
Right. Sorry. Okay, so here I'm going to be PC and answering the question. There's no doubt that Bongani was a God-fearing person.
Yeah.
Okay, but as a person that understood that we live in a multicultural society, that we live amongst people with all matter of worldviews, he never, ever, ever, ever sort of, I don't know what the word is, but imposed that anywhere other than, I think, his most intimate, close people. It was obvious to anyone that knew him, he was very much a God-fearing person. But that's why I actually turned to Gugu, who's in a much better space to speak to that.
Perfect. But thank you very much, because I think what we're hearing you saying is, it's in how he showed up, but not necessarily as an imposition to others. And that's quite an important distinction to make. Gugu, your sense of your father's belief and how it shaped his worldview and who he was in the world and what he did in the world?
I think God shaped him tremendously. He was a man of routine, so we all know this. So he did the same thing every day. He ate the same muesli and yogurt and a slice of toast every single morning. But the first thing he would do was pray. So Umama would say in the shower, that's when he would have his quiet time with God. And he was very intentional about doing that consistently. And I think consistency is something that has kind of threaded through everything that everyone has spoken about. But I think the biggest lesson I've learned from him, I mean, there's so many, but to touch on one, I think is humility. And I think that's one thing he always prayed for, was for God to give him the humility. But I also think it's the way that he understood his purpose.
Yeah.
And he understood his purpose because he knew who God was for him. And he understood his role on earth. And that's carried me through as well.
Sure, that's beautiful. So we hear humility, a sense of service, but also the purpose that comes through in everything that he did and the way he showed up. Prof, before I go back to the audience, has the country gone through a heart transplant? Has there been a fundamental shift in mindset, in how we engage and how we interact? Have we crossed a particular point now where we're beginning as a country to look at the future differently? And I'm paraphrasing the question quite a lot, but I think it's a beautiful question that speaks about coming to a point of deciding that we are going to be different as a people. Do you think we're there yet?